Now, of course, our world is not perfect. Whether you attribute that to sin or the natural state of things is rather beside the point. There will always be things we can do to alleviate suffering, but there will also always be suffering we can do nothing to eliminate. Now, I cannot help but be optimistic about humanity and believe that we do have a greater capacity for compassion than we do for indifference. And this is despite everything we see in the news. I am still clinging to this optimism. We are moved by the plight of others. If that weren't the case, then drama would have no appeal. We experience real feelings of sympathy for fictional characters we know rationally are not really facing whatever crisis is being portrayed. The impetus towards compassion is one of our greatest blessings as human beings. People who are mindful of and cultivate their compassion are instruments of peace, while those who suppress it are the architects of evil. But it is also a bit of a curse. Compassion is nothing less than recognizing that what has consequences for others also has consequences for us. It is opening yourself to what we consider to be negative emotions: despair, anger, frustration, misery, and no one wants to feel these for any prolonged length of time. And this is compounded when the person for whom we feel compassion is nearest and dearest to us. When their pain is severe and protracted, we can be easily overwhelmed with feelings of inadequacy and despair. Now, I mentioned Hey Jude a few moments ago. The lyrics leapt out at me as exceptionally relevant to our topic today. Paul McCartney provides us with wise words. And anytime you feel the pain, refrain. Don't carry the world upon your shoulders. For well you know that it's a fool who plays it cool by making his world a little colder. When he admonishes us to refrain, he isn't telling us to suppress the pain, but rather to refrain from allowing it to swallow us whole by keeping it to ourselves. We are social animals for a reason, but we are so often reluctant to accept help when it's offered. I think we also tend to feelings of unnecessary guilt when we experience pain because someone we care about is in pain. We feel we should be strong for them, and we have no right to indulge in self-care when we should be doing the caring rather than being cared for as well. And this is one reason why support groups for caregivers are so very important. They validate the experience and the emotional consequences. I know that across the street from my neighborhood, there's what's it called? The Alzheimer's Center? It's kind of a daycare center where adult caregivers can drop off. Because these adult caregivers need time away. They need to have some space. And I think it's vitally important that that's a reminder that the Alzheimer patient is suffering, but so are the people who care for them and love them. It is not indulgent to recognize the need for sharing a common experience and needing support for being someone else's support. Think of it as kind of a chain of care. It doesn't stop with immediate friends and family. They too need the love and support of their broader community of additional friends and family. Those of us who know someone suffering from proxy pain need to freely give of our patience with their unique trauma. Now, it can be easy to brush aside someone's angst about their sister's divorce or their cousin's cancer. After all, they aren't the one getting divorced or enduring rounds of radiation and chemotherapy. Now, we heard just such stories today during Joys and Concerns. I don't know if anybody noticed, but most of the concerns were not directly affected by the people standing up here. The people chose to share pain that they were experiencing because someone else was in pain. And when this happens, probably all of you hear, we hear the same audible gasps in the congregation. We see nodding of heads. But do we truly appreciate what the person is feeling who feels called to share their proxy pain? Do we follow up to see how they are coping? How many of us are going to call Sheila next week and see how her friend is doing? Now, there are two aspects to proxy pain we need to consider. what the person can do for himself or herself, and what we as a supportive community can do for the person suffering from proxy pain. And I'm going to be brutally honest. I don't know if I have a good answer for the first part. My parents were in the position of caring for my terminally ill grandmother at the end of her life. This happened right as my parents were retiring from their jobs and looking forward to the freedom that retirement brings about. And then all of a sudden, they had my mother's elderly mom living with her. And so my mother had to cope with the impending loss of her mother, as well as deal with the daily care duties, many of which were decidedly unpleasant. My mother essentially lost control and enjoyment of her own life for a couple of years, and there wasn't anything I could do about it. I certainly couldn't magically cure my grandmother's kidney failure. I didn't live anywhere near them to assist with the daily caregiving. I spent the time worrying about my mother and feeling frustrated and helpless to do anything about it. And I hope you don't think less of me, but at that point, I probably grieved more for my mother's situation than I did for my grandmother's illness. Basically, all I could do was call my mother from time to let her know I was thinking of her, visit when I could, and most importantly, listen. And this is where having a number of people involved can really help. My mother was reluctant to complain to me, but my father let me know exactly what their situation was like. He helped me help my mother find her voice so she could eventually vent some of her frustrations and her emotions. Meanwhile, my husband and my brother-in-law were present for my sister and I when we needed to express our proxy pain. There wasn't a thing they could do about it, but we knew they cared, that we cared. And sometimes that's all there is. Experiencing proxy pain can be a lonely experience because we fear others will not understand. We're being selfish, indulgent. And I think it's worth the risk to share with someone you trust. It behooves us as a covenantal community to become people of trust. Help someone find his or her voice. Be silent. Listen. And be available. Give them the opportunity to share their frustrations beyond joys and concerns, to share their hopes, their despair, their relief. Provide the human touch with a hug, handshake, touch on the shoulder. Send a thinking of you note at any time, email, snail mail. Cry with them. Offer a concrete form of help and follow through. Listen patiently even if you hear the same story many times. And you know what? It is okay to say, I have no words to make it better. I'm just there for you. Give support, not judgment. Avoid cliches. Please don't say, I know how you feel. Don't say, this too shall pass. Be authentic or be silent. And just listen with undivided attention. Share your experiences, but avoid turning it into an emotional competition. Refer appropriate support groups. Offer to attend the first meeting with them. You may not have the power to change the situation and eliminate the suffering, but you do have the power to change the experience and alleviate the suffering. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. May we all have the courage to love and support one another with compassion. That is always one thing we can change for the better. Peace be with you.